Hello, I'm Lucas Cuni-Mertz, Associate Editor of Baking and Snack Magazine, and this is a Baking and Snack Tech Expert. In our July issue, Nick Sturgess, Head of North American Sales for Danmatic, discussed how the right topping equipment can reduce ingredient waste for bakers. Today, he'll share more about how Danmatic's seeding and spraying solutions can achieve this waste reduction and save on costs. Thanks for joining us today, Nick.
Thanks for having me, Lucas. It's a pleasure to be on here. I love reading and watching the tech experts, so to have the chance to share my insight is it's a real pleasure.
We're happy to hear that, and we're very happy to have you. So, for some background, how does the seeding and spraying of products often contribute to waste for bakers?
Yeah, I think that the most obvious answer to that is raw material waste. I think we should look at the change in consumer demand over the past 10, 15 years, but even over the past 5 years since COVID, where there is a higher demand for higher quality product. So a more premium product, whether that's with seeds, with glaze, or with both. I think that in the past, bakers have had some premium product, and there's been good channels for that. But I think there's been an increase in demand over that, and so the equipment of yesterday is not suited for the demands of today, and bakers are having trouble from a waste standpoint, keeping up with that demand. And so we look at raw material waste, seeds or glaze that are ultimately not ending up on the product and are being thrown away or unable to be reused, leading to significant raw material waste. I think there's also hidden waste points that we don't talk about that aren't as apparent. When you walk on a line, it's easy to see waste for seeds or glaze. You can see the seeds on the floor, or you can see the glaze pooling up in different spots. But I think waste points that we also need to recognize is how much time you're spending cleaning the line, how much time you're spending cleaning your pans. Do you need a more rigorous pan cleaning process because now you're spraying glaze, 2 shifts a day, 6 days a week, 360 days a year? So the pan cleaning process, the lifetime of pans shortens in situations like this. Do you have to take your pans offline for recoating? So other than just the actual material cost, there's hidden costs as well that we like to focus on and look at, and how can we minimize all of the above.
So, what is Danmatic's zero waste principle, and how do you guys achieve the zero waste seeding and spraying of product?
Yeah, the Danmatic zero waste principle is essentially making sure we're only putting topping, whether that's a glaze, a seed, flour, whatever it may be, on the product, and only putting the precise amount that the baker's looking for. So if we're running hamburger buns in pans, making sure that we're putting whatever the spec amount of glaze is, and then however much sesame seeds we're putting on, if that's 5 grams per product, and making sure we're not covering a whole pan, but instead we're only putting it on the product. With pans, it's hard to reuse and recirculate seeds or glaze. So making sure we're as accurate and precise as possible. That's really the Danmatic zero waste principle. And then that transfers over for different, it's really based on product set. So for bagels, for example, when we run out, when we're seeding, after the boiler, and we're putting a glaze on for seed adhesion. So making sure what we put on the product is staying on the product. And when we use a Danmatic moistening roller, all the seeds that end up on the belt get recirculated, and we end up with zero waste that way. So it's a combination of different Danmatic principles, just different Danmatic equipment. But the whole idea is making sure we're reusing as much as possible and targeting only the product when we can and when the application lends itself to that.
So, what cost savings can be achieved through this zero waste principle, and what savings have you seen bakers achieve?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to is what is possible with this equipment. And so the most important thing is the raw material savings, right? Making sure that we're only putting toppings, glaze, seeds, whatever it may be, directly on the product, and exactly how much our customer wants. And then avoiding empty spots on a pan, for example. If we have a 6x4 hamburger pan, making sure we're not spraying into the empty positions, making sure we're not seeding into the empty positions, because when those go through the oven, they get baked on. There's a more rigorous pan cleaning process downline. Maybe that leads to a more frequent recoating or repanning. And so it's all encompassing, where it's, how do we eliminate strictly raw material waste, but also the hidden costs that we talked about with pan cleaning, pan coating, cleaning of the line in general. And so we look at making sure our equipment is designed that we know the first row of product is 2 inches from the edge of the pan. We use product detection to know what positions are missing, what positions are full, and then we adjust our equipment accordingly in line. I think also for different applications, right? If we have an opportunity to get away from spraying with a moistening roller, for example, for a bagel line, where instead of spraying the liquid, we are rolling it on. I think that's an important way. And so the Danmatic zero waste principle is all encompassing, where it's how are we targeting, how are we ensuring seed adhesion, and how are we making sure we can reuse what's not on the product if any stuff does miss. So the most recent example, and I think a great way to tell the story of Danmatic zero waste principle, is for a bagel line that we just installed the seeding, moistening roller, and pressing roller on for a customer, where I think it's a 12 or 15-foot line, where they were going from 1,000 pounds of seed waste every single day down to just 100. And we're still making adjustments to the equipment. We just installed it last month to continue to lower that waste number. And so I think the important way to look at that is sure, there's, the material savings of, $600,000 every month. $600,000 a year. And so the payback on that equipment is quite short, under a year and a half. But I think it's important to look at the framework to change how we look at it and say, well, if the Danmatic equipment will last me 20 years and I can pay it back in a year and a half, is how much am I making going forward? Not how much are my savings, but how much, if you can put $500,000 back into your business every single month for the next 18 and a half years, that's meaningful money. And I think it's something we have to, help people see is what's possible. And I think that goes back to how much the requirements behind seeding and spraying and topping has changed over even just the past 5-10 years. And so that's really what we're focusing on. We're trying to tell the story, and we're trying to show what's possible, and we feel quite confident about it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Nick, for joining us today on this Baking and Snack Tech Expert.